On a farm in the small town of Gornik, the radio is broadcasting news of a new type of spore that is spreading throughout the region. It seems that the melting of the polar ice caps has released an unknown species of fungus, which has spread to the sea and is contaminating all living things. This spore has already reached the town of Gornik, and the owner of the farm was one of the first victims, his body covered in strange stains. However, from inside the stable, a human hand is seen through the window, indicating that the farmer is still alive, now as an infected person. Months later, an agent from the Scientific Research Center walks through the city's forests, collecting samples of the fungus. Wearing protective suits, he follows the search, while listening to the news on the radio, with scientists explaining more about the spores and the effects they have on humans. In addition to dizziness, fever and malaise, the body becomes covered in spots, indicating the accelerated decomposition of the skin. Over time, the infected lose control of their actions and become extremely aggressive, attacking anyone who crosses their path. The news continues, and he continues to collect samples of the fungus when he comes across a campsite in the middle of the forest. When he enters, he sees the owner of the tent, who apparently lost her life days ago, with her skin deteriorated and the rest of her body covered in fungus. The agent then collects some of it and keeps it in a container, informing his superiors of his discovery. However, just as he was about to take more samples, the woman in the stall grabs his arm and pours a gush of dark liquid, hitting him right in the mask. Frightened, the agent runs away, while the infected woman crawls out of the tent, her face transformed by the fungus. Minutes later, the guy runs through the forest, until he finds a pond and tries to clean off the dirt around the mask. However, he falls unconscious into the pond, becoming yet another victim of the fungal infection. A few days later, in the neighboring town, a photographer called Lewis travels along the road in search of photos to sell to the newspaper. As soon as he finds an abandoned house, Lewis goes inside and takes pictures of the place, with signs of the infection scattered everywhere. As soon as he has finished taking the photos, he hears the sound of gunfire in the distance, but he ignores it and returns to his car. While resting for a while, Lewis hears another noise in the distance, but this time it's a woman's screams. The photographer runs to see what has happened, but all he finds is an abandoned vehicle in the middle of the forest. To make matters worse, when he tries to get back to his car, he injures his leg while walking through the grass. Lewis is then forced to limp back to the vehicle, but when he goes to check the injury, the situation is much worse than he thought, and he has to use a needle and thread. Once he has finished patching up, the photographer continues along the road until he comes across a cabin in another part of the forest. The place seems to be abandoned, and Lewis decides to spend the night inside, while taking notes and listening to the local news. When evening comes, he builds a fire in the middle of the field and tries to relax a little, but his leg wound gets worse and worse. Soon afterwards, Lewis hears the roar of some wild animal, but instead of going into the hut, he just ignores it and continues to rest in front of the fire. At dawn, the photographer wakes up to more roaring sounds and decides to go and see what it is, carrying only a lamp. As he walks through the forest, he finds the same agent on the ground who was wearing the protective suit, with a lot of fungus around his body. Looking under his clothes, Lewis finds the guy without his head, and next to him, a strange creature is moving through the grass. Everything indicates that the fungus not only spreads quickly through the human body, but is also capable of creating organisms of its own using parts of its host. This grotesque image frightens Lewis, but everything only gets worse when the body shoots the same brown compound into the photographer's face. He runs desperately back to the hut, leaving the door open and holding a knife to defend himself. However, no one shows up, and his injured leg begins to turn a dark color, as if it were an effect of the fungal infection. He then grabs his backpack and looks for his cell phone to call for help, but the man has left it in the car. The only way out is to risk leaving the hut, and as soon as he finds his cell phone inside the car, he tries to call a coworker, but the guy doesn't pick up. Suddenly, Lewis feels his leg being pulled and sees the agent in the protective suit crawling out from under the vehicle. The photographer runs back to the hut, where he hears a roar again, but this time from the attic. As he climbs the ladder to see who's there, Lewis comes across the same infected as before, so he attacks him in the neck, giving the photographer no chance to react. The next morning, Lewis wakes up in the middle of the living room, feeling sick from the fungal infection. Not only is he unable to move his leg, but her left arm and neck are covered in dark, fungal stains, and his blood has turned a bluish color. Even though he can't move his arm, the photographer starts the car and sets off through the forest, hoping to find help before it's too late. The next day, a traveler named Mila is walking along the road when she hears a car approaching and asks for a ride. The driver is none other than Lewis, who, despite his condition, decides to give the young woman a lift. After traveling for a few kilometers, Liwi's infection spreads more and more and he loses control of the car, stopping in the middle of the road. Mila asks if he's all right, but the guy attacks her and breaks her nose with a punch. The girl panics and runs away, but Liwi's, now an infected man, starts chasing her. She does her best to throw him off, but he manages to find her hiding among the trees and tries to capture her. Mila then continues her escape and runs towards the field, with Liwi's trying to follow her at any cost. Fortunately, the photographer's infected body gradually weakens and he sits on the ground, unable to get up. As soon as she manages to get a good distance from the infected, Mila finds a car in the middle of the forest and asks if anyone is around. However, all she finds are shotguns inside the vehicle and a body in front of a cabin. Even though she was frightened at the sight, Mila decided to enter the house and came across something even more frightening. In front of her appears an infected couple called Wendy and Franklin, but they are in an even more advanced stage of the disease, their bodies having undergone a terrible mutation. Surrounding them is an unusually large fungus with a huge mouth in the area of Franklin's belly. Despite this state, Wendy uses her last strength to ask Mila to put an end to them, as the couple can no longer stand this situation. To put them both out of their misery, the young woman takes a small tank of fuel and spreads it all over their bodies. Then she sees a flare, but when she removes the lid to light it, she doesn't have the courage and leaves the house. Tormented by what she has just seen, Mila cries out in despair, but knows she has to give the couple a dignified end. Because of this, she goes to her car, grabs the shotgun and returns to the house, with the gun pointed in their direction. However, once again the young woman hesitates, and as she can't eliminate them, she hands over the gun so that they can put an end to it themselves, and so Franklin shoots himself. The problem is that the infected blood ends up dripping onto Mila and hitting a wound on her back. Without realizing it, the young woman leaves the house and tries to look for something useful in the car, when she finds a cell phone. However, before she can call anyone, she feels a strong discomfort in her back. When she touches the wound, she notices that her blood is now a bluish color, proving that like Liwi's, she too has been contaminated by the fungus. With the infection spreading rapidly, Mila walks through the forest, and after a few minutes, she falls to the ground, without the strength to continue. A month later, in a house in the suburb of Gornik, a man called Ben is lying on the floor of his bedroom. On the other side of the door is his wife, Vera, holding a knife, indicating that she was forced to attack her own husband. When she opens the door, she sees the cell phone next to Ben and picks it up, but then the guy starts to squirm, beginning his transformation into an infected. Vera quickly locks the door again and tries to send a message on her cell phone, but the internet connection is cut off. Soon after, someone knocks on the door and Vera fears it's Ben, but instead of him, her son Thomas appears, who has come to rescue his mother. Vera explains what happened between her and Ben, and is afraid that the same thing has happened to Arden, her other son. She asks Thomas if his brother is all right, but he says he doesn't know where he or his nephews are. Because of this, Vera says she wants to stay in the house, as Arden could arrive at any moment, needing help. However, Thomas insists that it is dangerous to remain there, and his fear is confirmed when Ben starts writhing on the floor again because of the fungus. With no other choice, the two hurry to get the car from the garage and Thomas says he's heard about a safe station in the city of Columbus. He suggests going there, but first he needs to make a stop at home to pick up his supplies. Vera agrees, but before they leave, Thomas hears sounds coming from outside and believes someone is nearby. Holding a knife, he decides to check outside, hoping it's Arden. Shortly afterwards, Thomas appears in a panic next to the car, his hand covered in blood. His mother asks what happened, but he just wipes the dirt off his arm and tells her to get out of there as soon as possible. After a few kilometers on the road, they arrive at Thomas's house, where they find Arden's car parked in front of a warehouse. The two go inside to look for him, but there is no sign of him or his children anywhere. All that remains is to collect the supplies from inside the garage, which contain weapons, military rations and other survival equipment. Thomas hurries to get everything into the trunk of the car, and outside the house, he hears the sound of grunting, but no one is around. Just in case, Thomas and Vera go to get the rest of their things to get out of there, without realizing that they are being watched by someone. He soon turns out to be Arden, who has also been infected and begins to advance towards the house. Inside, Thomas takes another box containing 2 machetes and hands one to his mother, as there may be more infected around. After that, the two of them go to check if there is anything else they can take, when they see a boy sitting on his back on the ground, next to a young woman. To Thomas and Vera's horror, these are Arden's children, who have also been infected by the fungus. The girl approaches them and lets out a powerful scream, her mouth taking the shape of tentacles, indicating that the infection has passed into an advanced stage. Vera is frightened to see what has happened to her grandchildren, but Thomas pulls her away before they too are contaminated. As soon as they get through the door, Thomas sends his mother into the room and does his best to block the passage before his nephews can get through. Luckily, Thomas manages to close the door just in time and rushes his mother back to the car, with the two of them setting off down the road again. Along the way, the whole town seems to be desolate, but when they reach a street, they come across a nun holding a blood-stained machete. Seeing the car, the woman walks away, leaving the body of a priest on the ground, who had possibly also been taken over by the fungus. After this sinister event, Thomas and Vera continue to drive along the road, listening to the news on the radio about the latest updates on the contamination. Halfway there, Thomas decides to stop and looks at the map to find out where they are. Without the two of them realizing it, an infected man gets up from the passenger seat, revealing himself to be Arden, who had entered the car minutes before they left. Without hesitation, the infected man attacks her brother and Vera tries to help her son, but it's too late and she is forced to get out of the car before she becomes another victim. Another day passes, and far away, a young doctor called Serena is collecting equipment in her garage. Suddenly, a stranger bursts in, upset by what is happening outside, and asks for help. Serena tells him to leave her house, but Israel threatens her, saying that he can't leave or he'll become infected too. At the same moment, he starts coughing and Serena sees that his hand is stained with blood. She orders Israel to explain what happened, and as soon as he catches his breath, he calms down and promises to tell her everything. Before he does, Israel sees Serena's backpack and asks if she's leaving. The young woman says yes, because she wants to go after her sister, who left to travel as a backpacker, but hasn't returned or been heard from in over a month. It is then revealed that Serena is the sister of Mila, the same traveler who met a tragic fate in the forests of Gornik. Without knowing what happened to her sister, she tells Israel to continue his story, otherwise she'll throw him out of the house, even by force. The guy then tells her that he came to town with his wife, Lily, to look for her sister and nephew. When the infection spread, the couple were worried about them, especially as Lily's nephew had reduced mobility. Because of this, the two decided to help them, but in the middle of the road, they came across a family in an advanced state of infection. According to Israel, he saw their bodies covered in mold and a strange coloration of blood. As Lily still had no idea of all the information about the infection, she felt sorry for the family and insisted that her husband stop the car and help them. Unfortunately for her, Lily ended up being attacked by the infected and Israel tried to protect her, which explains the blood on his hands. Despite this, the infected set off after them and the couple ended up separating, with Israel finding Serena's house. He assures her that he is no threat to her and that he attacked the infected because they were no longer human, but monsters. With all the truth revealed, Israel warns Serena that she must flee the city as soon as possible and that he has heard about a safe place in Columbus. However, Serena refuses, saying that she won't leave the house and that she has enough supplies to get by on her own. Israel argues, saying that she will only last a week, and very soon, the infected will invade her home and turn her into one of them. The argument continues until he hears something coming from outside the house and tries to listen through the garage door. The sound seems to be a woman crying and he asks who is on the other side, but Serena says she doesn't hear anything. Even so, he decides to go out and see, as it could be Lily in need of help. Serena insists that he doesn't open the door, as it could be another infected person, but he decides to go anyway. Annoyed, Serena locks the door, but seconds later, Israel returns and begs for help because he has managed to find his wife. Even knowing the risks, Serena has a crisis of conscience and opens the garage door, holding a flashlight. Shortly afterwards, she lets Israel into the house with his wife Lily, who is seriously injured. Serena tells Israel to put her on the table in the garage, but when the woman turns around, the young doctor is startled to see a frightening creature growing out of her back. However, Israel tells Serena to calm down and assures her that everything will be fine. Then, using his hands, he pulls a parasite out of his wife's back, but as he does so, Lily's condition begins to deteriorate rapidly. Desperate, Israel asks Serena for help, but he has no idea what is happening to Lily. Things only get worse when they start to hear someone knocking on the garage door and believe it's an infected person. In the midst of this chaotic situation, Lily loses energy to the point of unconsciousness. Soon afterwards, the woman starts writhing on the table and Serena believes she is in shock, so she quickly puts a sheet over her and tries to contain her sudden movements. However, something seems to want to get out of Lily's body, and when Israel removes the sheet and shirt, they both see a fungus growing on the woman's body. What they don't realize is that outside the garage is the same creature that came out of the infected agent's body in the forest. It seems that the creature has managed to trace the fungus growing inside Lily and is trying at all costs to break into the garage. Inside, Israel becomes increasingly desperate and orders Serena to save his wife. The young woman insists that there is nothing more to be done, but when Israel tries to push her, Serena pulls out a steel shovel and tells him to back off. At the same moment, the fungus on Lily's body grows more and more, until it splashes the same dark liquid onto Israel's face. Then a huge fungus comes out of Lily's body and the creature's screams make the monster outside even more agitated. Faced with this situation, Israel completely loses his senses and tries to help his wife, but the man is attacked by the creature that was born inside Lily. The only thing left for Serena to do is run away, and when she sees the monster outside the garage, she runs desperately towards the forest. Another day passes and Serena finds a car on the road and sets off towards the city of Columbus, hoping that she will find a safe place free from contamination. On the way, she comes across Vera, who was walking along the road after being forced to leave her sons Thomas and Arden. The two had met before, and before letting her in, Serena asks if she's all right and if she's been infected. The woman says no, and the two set off down the road, having lost their loved ones to the infection that has spread in Gornik. The fate of the two remains a mystery, but in another house in town, the radio continues to play and announces the latest news about the fungus. After much research, a scientist claims that the spores are spread through dark mucus or contact with infected blood. When this happens, the human host undergoes a change in its DNA, causing a grotesque creature to be generated in its body. Finally, the scientist ends the broadcast by saying that from this moment on, humans are in a state of war against nature. Everyone will have to unite, not only to develop a cure, but also to confront the fungus-born creatures that will soon take over the planet. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.